Chapter-4. First visit to Dakshineswar. At this period, one could find a decided change in her conduct and behavior. She now became more quiet and serious, an embodiment of love and sympathy for all, and ready to adapt herself to any circumstance. Her inward bliss was so great that no earthly difficulty or suffering could affect her. She would have continued in that exalted state, except for the fact that whispers went round in that small village that her husband had gone mad. While Sri Ramakrishna passed his days in divine ecstasy, people interpreted his extraordinary behavior as signs of mental derangement. And this news spread to all his relations. People of Jairambati began to show sympathy for Sarada sad plight. Little knowing the expression of such sympathy made her suffering much worse. Sarada avoided socializing and busied herself with work so that she might not have to hear any gossip with reference to her husband. But the rumor was very strong that Sri Ramakrishna had gone mad, that he went about naked and muttered unintelligible words. Could it be true? Thought Sarada to herself. Is he then not what I found him to be? If it be so, then it is my duty to be by him at this critical moment. But how could she go to Dakshineswar? The idea was next to impossible for a person like her, situated at Jairambati, was at such a great distance, and the communication also so difficult. But the silent prayers of a sincere and devoted heart were heard by God, and an unexpected opportunity presented itself to Sharamadami for going to Dakshineswar. On an auspicious occasion, some women from neighboring villages were going to Calcutta for a bath in the Ganga. Sarada expressed a desire to be in that pilgrim party. When the news reached the ears of her father, he at once understood the real cause behind her desire. So he readily gave permission and himself accompanied the party so that his beloved Sarada might be well taken care of. The distance of about 100 kilometers had to be covered on foot. Only the rich could afford to go in a palanquin. As that luxury was out of the question for poor Ramchandra, he, along with his daughter, started on foot. Sarada, unaccustomed to walking a long distance, found the journey strenuous. But physical suffering was nothing compared to the joy of meeting the Master. So she altogether ignored any hardship that came on the way. But on the third day, before the party could reach Calcutta, Sarada had a high fever. It was impossible for her to walk in spite of her desire to continue the journey. So a shelter had to be found in a cottage built for travelers. At night, the fever rose very high, and Sarada lost all outward consciousness. The Holy Mother used to narrate afterwards that while she was in that condition, she saw in a vision that a girl dark in complexion but exquisitely beautiful in appearance sat by her side, caressing and nursing her. When asked who she was, the girl said that she came from Dakshineswar, that she was the Holy Mother's sister, and had come all the way to receive her. After that, Sarada fell asleep. Strange to say, the next morning the fever was gone, and she was able to start. On the way, she had fever again, but Ramchandra somehow managed to reach Dakshineswar by nightfall. What was the anxiety of Sri Ramakrishna to see Sarada come in that condition? Immediately, he busied himself in making all arrangements for the patient and set up a bed for her in his own room. Often he repeated in great sorrow, but with childlike simplicity, "You have come when dear Mathur is no more, Had he been alive, no difficulty whatsoever would arise as to taking care of you. Now that he is gone, who will take his place? But did Sarada receive less care? Sri Ramakrishna himself began to nurse and attend to her day and night, and that so carefully in the course of 3 or 4 days she was all right. After that, Sarada was shifted to the ground floor of the Nahabat, a very small 2-story building close to Sri Ramakrishna's room, the upper story of which was intended for temple music, where she stayed with Chandramani, her mother-in-law, who was at that time at Dakshineswar. Sarada could hardly believe her eyes when she found her husband, who was reported to have gone mad, feeling so much anxiety at her illness and showing so much kindness and affection. Was there any woman in this world so blessed as to receive such loving care from her husband? Sarada knew for certain that whatever might be people's opinion, her divine husband was perfectly sane. Not only that, but there had not been the least change in his attitude toward her. Ramchandra was glad to see his daughter happy and comfortable at Dakshineswar, so he returned to his village home, leaving Sarada in the privileged position of serving her husband and old mother-in-law. It was in March of 1872 that the Holy Mother reached Dakshineswar, about 5 years after she had been last seen by the Master at Kamarkapur. She was 18 or 19. Sri Ramakrishna at this time lived in constant divine communion. The greater part of the day and night he would remain in an ecstatic condition. Even a slight incident, the singing of a devotional song or the sight of anything which had a divine association, however remote, would throw his mind into samadhi, and he would become oblivious of his surroundings. He was more at home on the divine plane than we are on the earthly plane. But when Sarada arrived at Dakshineswar, he was not forgetful of his duties to his wedded wife. If she so desired, Sri Ramakrishna was willing to sacrifice his very mission for her. Sarada also, on her part, was too pure and noble to have the slightest inclination to drag her saintly husband to a life of worldliness. She clearly told him about this and readily responded to his ideals and aspirations. All that she wanted was to be near him and to have the privilege of serving him and molding her own life according to his direction. Sri Ramakrishna gave her that favor in abundance. Though the Holy Mother was accommodated at the Nahabat and in the course of the day could not meet the Master because he had visitors, at night she was allowed to stay in his room and share the same bed with him. Sarada at this time would receive from her divine husband instructions in high spiritual matters, as well as about mundane things. It was not a life of conjugal relations, but of great spiritual training, so much so that the wife in Sarada was merged in the disciple in her. Afterwards, nobody could perceive in her utterances and behavior anything that betrayed her special claim on Sri Ramakrishna. She was only the humble disciple of the Master, and this was to her a matter of supreme joy and privilege.